Welcome into 5 Wide, props and locks for NFL Week 18. We got 3 of my favorite plays for this week in the NFL. Tough week to navigate. We've got a lot of teams without anything to play for. We've also got a lot of teams with something to play for. We're looking at a lot of these games that do have implications for the playoffs. Ensure motivation, ensure personnel would be the best way to look to bet on these games. I know a lot of people might look at player incentives. Definitely not into that. Do not think that market is something that you should be investing in this time of the year. Honestly, quite frankly, some of these I do look to fade because I do think they're overpriced. But on the season, 28-17, we have gone the entire NFL season at hitting our bets at an over 60% rate. We're at 62.2%. We did not have picks last week. I was off. Actually went to the Rose Bowl, had an awesome time there. But on Christmas weekend, 2-1, the Jets absolutely royally fucked me by blowing a 20-point lead against the Commanders, if you can remember that one. But 3 of my favorite plays, a couple of player props, and a side for you. Let's get into it. Let's start on Saturday with arguably biggest game of the weekend. I know potentially the Bills-Dolphins to end the week could be the biggest game of the weekend with the Bills potentially not making the playoffs, but these 2 teams are playing for a playoff spot. The Colts and the Texans Saturday night. Very excited for this one. Total's pretty high in this game, like 47.5. Going to a player prop though. Don't really like a side or the total too much. Would kind of lean the under honestly at 47.5, but Michael Pittman over 6.5 receptions. I love this one. And maybe I'll give you guys the other play I like as well, and I've already bet as a little bonus here. But why do I like Michael Pittman over receptions? Well, he's gone over this number in 10 of 15 games this season. He's gone over 6.5 receptions in 67% of his games this year. I think we're getting this at a discount because he's gone under in back-to-back games. But in his game against Houston earlier this year, that game was back in September, he did have 8 receptions in that one. So very capable of putting up these numbers against the Texans and has done it all season. But we've had a couple down games, get to buy back in at a really good price here. I think Houston, what cannot go unnoticed is the impact D'Amico Ryans has had on this defense, bringing that San Francisco scheme over to Houston, and it's really started to show itself in the latter half of the year. Houston has been a very, very good run defense. Last season, they were one of the worst in the league. This year, they're one of the best in the league, if you can believe it. They're 5th in EPA against the run. They're allowing just 3.3 yards per carry, which is second only behind the New England Patriots at 3.2. So this run defense is really playing well to close out the year. Honestly, in the last 5-6 weeks, I bet you they're probably the number 1 defense against the run. Now, what I think that means is you're going to see the Colts look to throw the ball a little bit more, lean on their passing attack in this game because, again, the run defense has been so good. Pass defense has not been quite as good as they've been against the run. So look for Minshew to throw the ball a little bit more than he did in their previous matchup where Pittman managed to go over this number. And I believe in this game, I don't know if this was a game that Minshew came in late, partway through, but he only had about 23 pass attempts here and they leaned on the run game a lot more. Could be the complete flip here. So looked also at some of the top receivers against Houston this season, or in recent weeks, sorry. Wide receiver ones, the top dog in these offenses, have been hyper targeted against this Houston secondary. DeAndre Hopkins last week with 7. If you remember the big game from Amari Cooper, 11 receptions against the Texans. Garrett Wilson had 9. These are 3 of the last 4 games the team has played that these number 1 guys have gone for 7+ receptions. So that is something that I've keyed in on. I think it's something you should pay attention to. Now, 6.5 receptions, I want to be very clear here. At FanDuel, you can get it at -138. A lot of books are going to have this more in like the 150 range. And even some books have this bump to 7.5. So FanDuel is the place you want to bet this if you're watching this video today. So love this one for Saturday night. And also we'll be playing, like I mentioned, with the Houston run defense, and he's playing Jonathan Taylor under. So I think very good script here I'm kind of looking at. I think if Taylor isn't running the ball well and they don't run it much, throwing it more means getting it to the number 1 guy. That's why I really like Pittman on the over. And I know more of you guys like playing overs than you do unders. But if you want to play Jonathan Taylor under rushing yards, I would do that too. Okay, another game with some sneaky playoff implications. Saints and the Falcons. These 2 teams are both still alive. They do need a Bucs loss, but both of them are still alive in playoff contention. They'll be playing at the same time as the Bucs do, so they're going to be going all out for a victory here. Of course, the Saints are at home in this game. Not going to a side here, not going to the total. Love another player prop. I'm going to Chris Olave over 70.5 receiving yards. Another player I think you're getting a little bit of a discount on. I don't think it's too much of one, but still one I think should be a little bit higher. So he's coming off one of the quietest performances of the season. He's had just 26 receiving yards and just 3 receptions in that game against Tampa Bay. But the reason that he had that down game against the Bucs are a team that like to play quite a bit of man coverage. They're zone coverage. They lean a lot more on zone than they do man. Now gets an Atlanta team. The Falcons are one of the highest man coverage units in the entire league. 40% of plays they're in man coverage, which is the second highest rate in the league. Why is that important? Well, Chris Olave thrives against man coverage. It's been the best way for him to find production. He's averaging 3.34 yards per route run, which is 7th amongst all receivers, receivers, running backs, tight ends. He's 7th in the entire league. He's also averaging 18 yards per reception, which is 22nd. Also, I'm looking at that because that means we're going to be hitting some explosive plays. So I like receptions too, but don't love it nearly as much as I like the yards because, again, he's capable of hitting big plays downfield against man coverage. So perfect spot here in that regard. But also, got an Atlanta team. I think this is the reason why he went over in his last matchup against Atlanta with 114 receiving yards on 7 receptions. Reason why I went over is Atlanta's a stout run defense, much like we talked about with the Houston Texans. 3rd in EPA against the run, allowing just 4 yards per carry, which is 9th in the league. This is a team that has the answers against the run, a little bit more susceptible to the pass as we saw as well against the Bears last week. So I like Olave here. I think he'll be leaned on quite a bit. 70.5 I think is a little bit too low. Could get back to a big number like he did against Atlanta back in November. Again, 114 yards in their previous meeting this year. Look for Derek Carr to throw the ball a little bit more here and look for the team to lean on the pass, and that means Chris Olave over 70.5 receiving yards. Last play, we're going to a side here. I mentioned I'll have it against a spread pick. I like the Vikings quite a bit. Plus 3.5 against the Lions. Lot for me to get into here with this game. So the first is, I think this is a really intriguing spot for one reason being the Vikings can still make the playoffs. And honestly, the way that they do it is unlikely, but definitely not out of the realm of possibility. So what do they need to get into the postseason? They need to win here against the Lions, which I think they're definitely capable of doing. And they also need the Seahawks and Packers to lose. And they also need one of the Saints or Bucks to lose, which I think all of these things are like all of these games that we're talking about are point spreads of less than 5. The only one that's above 3 actually is the Bucks and Panthers game, but they can still have the Saints lose and get in, and the Saints are only a 3-point favorite in that game. But all these teams are favorites. What I don't think enough people are realizing here, what I like about playing this and keeping the motivation factor for the Vikings all throughout this game is the fact that both the Packers and the Seahawks don't play until 4 p.m. So if this team gets into halftime and the Bucks or the Saints are trailing in their game at half, there's definitely going to be, I guarantee you this team's paying attention. We saw it with the Niners paying attention to the Eagles game the other week. If this team's paying attention and they see that there's a chance that they can still make the postseason, I definitely think you're getting a good price here, especially when you look at the Lions as a team who's pretty well locked into the 3 seed. They would need either the Cowboys or Eagles to lose. They're both pretty big favorites. The Cowboys have the Commanders. The Eagles have the Giants. So unlikely that both of those teams were to lose, or either of those teams were to lose their games. Those are teams that the Lions are obviously paying attention to, and they're locked into a playoff spot, but more likely than not locked into that 3rd seed. So that's something to pay attention to because the Lions have said they're going to be playing everybody. They're going to be playing all of their starters, but they get to halftime and those 2 games maybe are out of hand, or one of those games is out of hand. Then I just don't think it's realistic or a safe thing to do to play all of these starters, much like we saw Brandon Staley make that mistake last year and saw Mike Williams get hurt. So that's something I think that could potentially give us more value in this game as it goes on. But why do I like it from a matchup perspective? Well, I did play the Vikings in this game, 2 weeks ago. They did fail to cover in that game, but were in it right until the last play. Vikings have a great run defense, which I think is a good thing to look for when you're playing this Lions team that has that dynamic rushing attack between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Top 10 in EPA against the run of the Vikings, allowing just 3.8 yards per carry, which is 5th in the league as well. Flores, blitz heavy. We always talk about this Vikings team. I feel like we're talking about them, betting on them or against them quite a bit this year, but been very, very good to us. 47% of plays are the Vikings blitzing. Again, Brian Flores being that guy, it has been all of his career. Jared Goff, his ranks against the blitz. Nothing terrible, but did want to point it out. 62.7% completion percentage, 19th in the league, 7.1 yards per attempt, 21st in the league. He actually has the 3rd most interceptions with 6 against the blitz. But Goff was quite good against the blitz against the Vikings a couple of weeks ago. High completion percentage. His yards per attempt were relative to what his rank is, so wasn't creating explosive plays, but was completing passes. So going to look for this Vikings team to be a little bit more creative here in their packages and in their defense, but I do think this isn't a bad recipe in terms of defensive scheme against Goff. And what I like here from the Vikings, very comfortable leaning on their pass game. They haven't had a great rushing attack all year between Ty Chandler and Alexander Mattison. Detroit is a team you can definitely have in the pass game. Detroit ranks 27th in EPA against the pass, allowing 7.7 yards per attempt, which is 28th in the league. Nick Mullins, starting at quarterback. He had 4 interceptions in that game against the Lions. If he did not throw that many interceptions, if he did a better job taking care of the ball, the Vikings were winning that game. He threw for over 400 yards here. I expect the Vikings to be right in this game. Good chance to win it. I love getting 3.5 points. I know they're on the road here, but I will take it with a Lions team who we still are not completely sure what their motivation looks out throughout this one. So I'll take the Vikings plus 3.5. All right, that's a wrap on week 18 in the NFL. 3 of my favorite plays for this week. We'll have plenty more for you guys heading into the postseason. Actually, I have a video coming out next week for one reason why every NFL playoff team won't win the Super Bowl. So stay tuned for that. We'll have picks for these games too. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us throughout the season. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well if you're looking for more. And if you are new, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.